And President Trump extending the deadline for TikTok. That says the pause to ban the company from U.S. app stores was set to expire today. He also says he'll make a decision on whether to strike Iran within 2 weeks. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from the White House.
Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon. All they need is a decision from the supreme leader to do that.
President Trump will decide over the next 2 weeks on whether the U.S. military will strike Iran. That says he's still giving the Iranian regime time to come to the negotiating table. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt from the press briefing room reading out a statement from Trump.
Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks.
Leavitt said that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff made a prior proposal, but Iran rejected it.
The deal that Special Envoy Witkoff proposed to the Iranians was both realistic and acceptable within its terms.
Trump has been holding meetings in the Situation Room on this and about what to do with Iran. While the president supports Israel's military action in Iran, he's been pushing for a diplomatic solution. There's been no word on Trump's desire for a regime change in Iran, but rather ensuring that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. Leavitt reiterated that Trump gave Iran 60 days to come and make a nuclear deal, but that on the 61st day, Israel struck Iran. That was last week. Trump says that he wants to make a decision last second, as a lot can change in war.
I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change.
Meanwhile, President Trump also extended the ban on Thursday on TikTok for 90 days. This is his third extension, with the hope of TikTok divesting from its Chinese owner and becoming American-owned over national security issues, as the CCP can directly access the user data of TikTok users.
There are 100 million Americans who use this app. It's wildly popular. He also wants to protect Americans' data and privacy concerns on this app, and he believes we can do both things at the same time.
The press secretary also added on Thursday that in May of 2025, ICE had released 0 illegal immigrants once detained into the interior of the U.S.
ICE officers are courageous heroes.
The White House is also calling on Congress to pass the One Big Beautiful bill, saying that it will increase take-home pay, increase wages, expands and makes the child tax credit permanent, and it has no tax on tips and overtime, and takes illegal immigrants off of Medicaid. The Trump administration is hoping that Congress can pass the One Big Beautiful bill and it reaches Trump's desk by July 4th. Reporting from the White House, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
In the Middle East, Israel reporting striking yet another nuclear site in Iran. Meanwhile, an Iranian missile striking a hospital in Israel. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest developments.
Israeli forces released video of an Iranian nuclear reactor, which they say has a key component used in the production of plutonium. And on Thursday, Israeli forces reportedly struck the site. And afterwards, Iran state-run media showed smoke rising from the nuclear facility in the city of Arak. Israel says the facility was inactive, but they struck it in order to prevent it from being restored and used for nuclear weapons development. Israel Defense Forces spokesperson General Efi Defrin said they also struck the Special Forces headquarters of Iran's internal security forces.
Our strikes are directed at every part of the Iranian military establishment, all of which threaten the state of Israel. Our actions are speaking louder than words. Those who act against us are paying a heavy price.
Israel says they launched 100 strikes on dozens of military targets in Iran early Thursday. And included in those strikes were Iranian soldiers, surface-to-surface missiles, and even construction equipment that was being used to repair missile launch sites. And on the same day, Iran released more footage of what they say were missiles fired at Israel. Some of the missiles made it through Israel's air defense systems and struck multiple locations, including a hospital in southern Israel. Medical staff were seen evacuating patients, and debris was seen scattered throughout the building's interior. The director of the hospital said a fire broke out and several wards were completely demolished.
This specific building, because it's an older building, was evacuated by us in the past few days, and the department it was directly hit was empty at the time it was hit.
He said 40 people in the hospital were injured, some from broken glass and falling ceilings. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also visited the site.
We see the whole difference here. We are hitting with precision the targets of the nuclear and missile programs, and they're hitting a hospital where people can't even get up and run away.
An Iranian missile also hit the center of a building complex in Holon near Tel Aviv, causing damage to 5 buildings around the area of impact. And some high-rise buildings near Tel Aviv were also damaged by an Iranian missile. Israel's foreign minister Gideon Sa'ar spoke with reporters after the attacks. He said that regime change in Iran is not one of Israel's goals in the conflict. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Iran has threatened to close down the Strait of Hormuz in retaliation for the ongoing conflict with Israel. But it is China, not the West, that might bear the brunt of the economic fallout. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, brings us more.
I think any American intervention would be a recipe for an all-out war in the region with very, very bad consequences for the whole international community. We are in contact with almost all countries, including China and Russia, and we are trying our best in order to mobilize international community's unified response against this act of aggression.
Just as Iran had its so-called axis of resistance with Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, the now deposed Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad, and militias in Iraq, so does the Chinese Communist Party rely on its proxies to wage asymmetrical war against the United States through Iran, North Korea, and Russia. And just as Iran was left severely exposed after Israel and the United States dismantled its axis, so can the Chinese Communist Party be severely weakened if its proxies fall.
Right. If we attack Iran, and it looks like we're going to do that, there's a number of things that people have warned about that are likely to happen. Closing the Straits of Hormuz, shutting off, therefore, about a quarter of the world's oil supply. That will sink stock markets around the world.
I mean, the only things that Iran can really pull off are attacking American troops with missiles in bases in Iraq, blowing up the Straits of Hormuz that for a few weeks.
Half of the oil that fuels the Chinese Communist Party's economy transits through the Strait of Hormuz, with Iran being its largest supplier. Israel has targeted Iranian oil infrastructure without affecting U.S. oil prices.
It went after oil storage and oil refineries in those depots, as well as, of course, the targeting of gas facilities in Iran South.
A weakened Iran not only affects severely the flow of military drones to Russia for its war in Ukraine, but it also becomes a liability for the Chinese Communist Party's economy.
If they don't have any deterrent capacity, that means that they're going to be essentially a Hamas-type threat, but much, much bigger. And so the long-term implications of that, I think, are much greater.
The Chinese Communist Party took 4 days to respond to the outbreak of the conflict in between Iran and Israel and has offered to negotiate a peaceful solution. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And as President Trump continues to weigh his options of U.S. military action in the conflict, what might the potential fallout be? Joining me now to discuss the latest is Yousif Kalian, policy advisor for Polaris National Security. Yousif, great to have you with us. President Trump will allow 2 weeks, he says, for diplomacy before deciding whether to launch a strike in Iran. If the United States acts, what might it look like, and ultimately, what would the result be, in your opinion?
First of all, thank you so much for having me today. I think President Trump has made clear that there will be no American boots on the ground if the U.S. decides to get involved. What we have seen, though, is that now a third Navy destroyer has moved into the Gulf region. Second carrier strike group is going in soon as well. So if the U.S. does get involved, we'll probably be just a limited strike at the Fordo, maybe Natanz nuclear sites. As President Trump has said, he's trying to get this, deal signed with the government in Iran to make sure that this doesn't happen, that this doesn't play out, but we don't really have high expectations given how they've been acting that they'll actually come to the table in good faith.
How do you think a nuclear-armed Iran shifting the balance of power and would ultimately impact the United States if we were to see some sort of a regime change?
I think right now the Iranian regime is worried about the situation. and it's going to probably try and escalate its aggression across the region to shield itself from that. Regime change is not the goal. I think even today, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has said that, and President Trump and allies in the U.S. have repeated those. But it's up to the regime whether that's the case or not.
Now, in responding to the Middle East conflict, how do we ensure that we don't lose sight of the Chinese Communist Party?
So I think the Chinese Communist Party is actually watching U.S. aid and support to Israel very closely for clues on our Taiwan response. Beijing knows that Israel is America's closest ally in the Middle East, and if the U.S. stands back while Iran attacks them, that's going to send a message to the CCP that they can attack Taiwan with little resistance. So ultimately, helping Israel defend itself is a powerful signal that the U.S. deterrence is strong and resolve should not be tested in Taiwan or anywhere else around the world.
Now, Iran is more of what some might call a regional foe of the United States, while China is the United States' greatest adversary on the global stage. Could a prolonged U.S. entanglement in the Middle East be precisely the kind of strategic distraction that China hopes for, much like some might argue the war on terror, as China gained access to the United States and various other places around the world for that matter?
So the way that I view it is that Iran is already a key part of China's strategy to create an anti-U.S. Eurasia axis alongside Russia. Iran going nuclear is only going to make China more of a threat, giving Beijing a region vital to global trade, energy, and American security interests. We've already seen China deepening its energy ties with Tehran by investing billions through Belt and Road projects, purchasing Iranian oil in defiance of U.S. sanctions. So whether we like it or not, these conflicts are intertangled. I don't think this is a strategic distraction. I think this is part of the game.
To your point, some have argued that even if Iran did not have a nuclear threat, by taking them out anyways, would indirectly or perhaps even more directly punish Russia and China. Talk to us about the relationship between Iran and China, how deep that connection is, and what a regime change in Iran, a hypothetical regime change, would do to China, perhaps.
Yeah. So China's invested billions in Tehran's oil exports. They've cooperated on technology. They've done a lot of building of infrastructure in Iran, and their ties have only gotten deepened, and they've signed many agreements together, unifying strategy on the foreign policy stage. Beijing is really propping up this regime. And I think if this regime is weakened and ultimately does end up falling, that's going to work against Beijing's interest in the Middle East, because it'll inevitably lead to the increase of American power and influence. It'll mean that Iran's proxies are also cut off root and stem in Iraq, in Lebanon, and other places around the region, which will make a regional order more in line with U.S. and allied interest, including our partners in the Gulf. All of that will be to Beijing's detriment.
As well as the flow of cheap oil that would stop flowing into China in an economy that is already really in serious turmoil due to COVID and other factors there. How would regime change in Iran really be possible, if at all? And what do we know from the Iranian people, sort of the temperature and attitude for such change?
Well, we know that the Iranian people don't like the regime. There have been polls that have shown that almost 3/4 of Iranians oppose the Islamic Republic in its current form, and about 80% want a new government, not reform. And these are polls by the Gaman Institute, which has done survey reports within Iran. The truth of the matter is, though, that there is no real ideal opposition in Iran because the government has invested so much in undercutting that opposition. The only realistic choices right now are essentially these minor ethnic political parties affiliated with different ethnic groups, the Kurds, the Azeris, or the son of the deposed Shah, who is currently based in the US and is probably the most connected and the most influential figure, most primed and ready to take over. The son of the Shah has also claimed multiple times that he has contacts with officials in the army and throughout governing bodies in Iran. So he's probably the most recognized and the most likely person currently to come back and actually lead a regime transition in Iran.
Yousif Kalian, appreciate you joining us to share your perspective. Thank you. The last American hostage to be released from captivity in Gaza has returned home today. Eden Alexander returned to Tenafly, New Jersey today after nearly 600 days in captivity. He arrived by motorcade to his hometown where local supporters lined the streets. Eden, who is now 21 years old, went to Israel at the age of 18 to join the Israeli military. He was abducted on October 7th with several other Americans and Israelis. He was freed last month. The release was the result of indirect negotiations between the United States and Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked President Trump for helping facilitate Alexander's release. And a SpaceX rocket exploding in Brownsville, Texas last night. Video footage capturing the explosion and an enormous fireball. SpaceX said the Starship experienced a major anomaly last night while on the test launch pad. The company saying there were no hazards to nearby communities, but asked people not to approach the site. Last night marked the 10th test flight for SpaceX's Starship. CEO Elon Musk's spacecraft is designed to carry both crew and cargo to Earth orbit, the Moon, and Mars. The rocket consists of two components, a booster and a Starship, both designed to be fully reusable. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.